Welcome back, everybody. I trust you've had an amazing week and God's been good to you and God's been pleased with you. Hey, I want to talk to you tonight about another kingdom hero attribute. It's called risk. The people that we've seen in the Hall of Heroes all knew risks. They knew what it was like to put all their eggs in God's basket, trusting God completely. There's a risk to faith, because you're dealing with something you don't see in advance. The evidence has not been validated for that particular issue or your situation. But the kingdom heroes, they all went in. And because they did, they reaped an eternal and oftentimes an earthly reward. But I'm going to be honest with you today. Faith is a risky business, because you're believing in something you haven't seen, you haven't touched. This is what I've learned about faith. Faith is not tethered to your five senses. That's why it feels risky. Maybe sometimes you just feel faith is kind of mystical. It's out there in the solar system somewhere. But it comes with the opportunity to gain a great, tremendous reward if you put your faith in that which is worthy of it, and that's simply God. A risk involves taking a chance on something without any impractical evidence for where it will end up or where it will wind up. Where's this going to take me? Man, I don't know, but I have faith that God's going to step in, and it's going to take me to healing. It's going to take me to restoration. It's going to take me to a mountaintop, but maybe I got to walk through the valley and the cactus. It's faith. Let me tell you, when you know you're on your way to being a kingdom hero, okay, let me help you. Here it is. When you're in a crisis, and you have to bet on God. Now, I don't normally encourage betting and gambling, but this really isn't a bet like that. It's, let me say, when you're in a crisis and you know you have to trust on the Lord. Does that sound a little more spiritual? But when you're in a crisis and you have to take the risk of faith, when you're in a crisis and you have to believe God is against all odds. I mean, Las Vegas has the odds against God. Well, I don't believe it. I believe in my God. You see, the children of Israel took risks. The blood on the doorpost. If you're not familiar with the story, let me give you a little 60-second back narrative. They were going to leave, and they were going up against Pharaoh, and God told Moses to tell the people, hey, the death angel's coming through, but if your people will put blood on the doorpost, your oldest son will not die. I know in this 21st century that sounds kind of morbid and like, well, that's freaky, but it's what they did because Pharaoh forced the hand of God. So the dad puts the blood on the doorpost. Okay, they're taking a risk. They go to bed. Now imagine with me if you're the oldest. I'm an oldest child. I'm an oldest boy. And I just know my personality. I just know the way I'm wired. I'm asking dad several times before I go to bed. I can't sleep. I wake up. I check the doorpost myself. Because if anything messes up, I'm toast. And so the dads took the risk that this blood on the doorpost is going to save my oldest son. Wow, you talk about a risk? Yeah. What about the children of Israel on the walls of Jericho? They're marching. Hey, if you'll march 7 times, these massive concrete, thick, tall walls are just going to crumble on their own? Oh, that makes no sense. Hey, do what I said, saith God. Why 7 times? Why can't we talk when we march the other times? That sounds goofy. No, here's a risk, but if you'll believe me, I will bring victory to your life. You can't prove whatever it is that's going to turn out, what the will is, just by hoping, but you still decide to move forward with the hope that it will. Because, again, here's the difference between Egypt, between the world, between the marketplace and the believers. They hope, and our word is changed to faith and obedience. You see, faith always involves risk because we can't see it. And God wants you to take the risk on Him because He knows He's dependable. We know God's dependable, but watch this. Our risk becomes a little riskier when it's our life. You're saying, hey, I trust God, Pastor. He's going to get us a new building. Trust God. He's going to find you something. Okay, thank you. But what if I tell you, hey, trust God, He's going to find you a new home? When it hits home, it's like, whoa, that's a little risky. But every kingdom hero that we've explored had faith, and it was risky. God regularly makes promises He wants us to act upon before we see if it's going to work out. You know, to be honest with you, this whole life is a walk of faith. We have faith that there is a heaven. We have faith that there's a hell I don't want to go to. I have faith there are streets of gold. And so I'm showing up every Sunday. I'm showing up to my community group. I'm teaching you to stay holy because I have faith we're all going to a kingdom that God has prepared for us. I have faith, John 14, in my Father's house are many mansions, is true. But when God places you in a scenario you can't buy your way out, maybe you find yourself in a situation you can't negotiate your way out. You find yourself and you get in a situation and you know you're in a spiritual crisis. Essentially, maybe God has boxed you in. What's more, in a situation like this, if God doesn't come through for us, we're sunk. Now that's scary. I validate you. I validate your humanity. This is exactly where the Israelites find themselves as we continue our walk through the Hall of Heroes. Living as a kingdom hero requires you to take risks. And the risk is faith. The heroic Christian life is all about risk. I'm okay with it. Because when you aren't living by sight, anything can happen and surprise you. Because it just pops up. But having said that, faith can be a risk because I can't see God, nor can I see the things I'm having faith for. Remember this, okay? It may be a risk for us, but it's always a calculated position from God. God knows. It's not a risk for God. Let me just kind of clear the air here. It's not faith with God. It's calculated, and I'm trusting God. I'm walking by faith and not by sight is a risk that guarantees us to draw closer to Him. Our ultimate goal in life is to draw closer to Him. You see, the people of Israel had to display their faith in God through the blood on the doorpost. Man, risky. They had never heard this kind of instruction before, and it was risky to rely on. And I can just see, the spouse says, hey, honey, are you sure? Is Moses kind of losing it? I mean, he's getting kind of spooky. What if it doesn't work? Are we minus a child in the morning? Hey, babe. Hey, dear. Let's trust the man of God that he heard from God. We don't see God. We didn't hear God, but we heard what the man of God said. And yet they took the risk to believe in something that didn't make any sense to them. And they were rewarded. Here's the cool thing, right? They were rewarded with their oldest son's life. So yes, there is a risk of faith because you are dealing with something that you do not see in advance. I validate it. Let me tell you when you know you're on your way to being a kingdom hero. When you are in a crisis and you have to bet and trust on God. When you're in a crisis and you have to take a risk of faith, maybe a leap of faith. When you're in a crisis and you have to believe that God is there against all odds, especially when you feel overwhelmed by the pressures of life and odds are against you. Let me remind us of Paul's writing, Romans 8:31. I quote it all the time from the pulpit, but I love it. Maybe because I need to lean into it. What then shall we say to these things? If God is for us, who can be against us? Thank you, Paul. I needed that. Thank you, Paul. We needed that. Matthew 19:26 says, Jesus said to them, with people this is impossible, but with God all things are possible. Faith builders. Proven, tracked, documented scriptures that faith really works. Let me close with this story. The story is of a blind girl that was caught in a fire in a multi-story building. Smoke is bellowing out. Firefighters are racing there. The fire trucks sirens are screaming. The firefighters and fire EMS jump out, have a net down there, and they tell her, hey, jump, jump. She's afraid. She's scared. She's blind. She's petrified. Can you imagine jumping from a multi-story building with your eyes closed? It's burning. You have to make a decision. They coached her from the ground to jump, but she just couldn't bring herself to jump. She was afraid. She was paralyzed with fear. Jumping, or maybe I don't burn and I stay here. Then she heard a voice say, jump, honey. Jump, my daughter. And she recognized the voice of her father. The story is that she jumped to safety and her life was spared. I think when God tells you what to do in a crisis, He says, jump. Daddy's calling. Jump, my child. Jump, honey. Hey, my son, I'm here. And we're scared and petrified, paralyzed by fear. And God's saying, we got you. You see, if you understand that, that will put you in the museum and make you a kingdom hero. So I think the takeaway of the lesson is, let's lean into the voice of our Father. Let's be a kingdom hero. Let's trust God even if there's risk. And God's going to catch us no matter when we jump. God bless you guys for being here.